This is the last segment of Between the Whistles, and we are ranking the Detroit franchises in the next 2 years of where they will be.
Power
The
rankings.
power rankings. And Cindy goes first. Cindy, who's your number 4?
My number 4 is the Detroit Tigers.
I'm going to agree with that one. I think we're in lockstep with the Detroit Tigers. We think that they're in an uphill battle to get talent, and compared to other franchises, they're falling behind quickly.
And they do not have a general manager who's made any smart choices, and I can't see any change. In order for them to move up in the power rankings, they're going to have to make a change, and even still, I don't think it can happen in 2 years.
Nope, baseball's the one where it takes a little bit of time to build up some capital.
Yep.
And get the right players in. And Major League Baseball might have a work stoppage, so we might be onto that because of 4.
Yep.
Number 3, who's your 3?
My number 3 is going to be the Detroit Pistons.
Whoa. Why?
Why? Because I think we're going to, until we see what happens in July with the draft, I think at this time they had their worst season ever. I think they've got a long way to go. I think they have a lot of potential, and I think they've got the building blocks. But I do think that it's going to take more than 2 years. Again, this could change depending on what happens in the draft, but they've got the right leadership at the helm. Now they just have to fill in the rest of the pieces, and I think it's going to take them a little time to develop those young players.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you. I'm gonna go 3. I'm gonna go Detroit Pistons, but that could change if they get a guy like Cade Cunningham or whatever. But the reality of the situation is they do need a superstar, NBA superstar league, and you gotta see what they do in the draft to see what they are capable of.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the Detroit Pistons being at 3 is a good spot because they can move up really quickly, or they can move. Well, they can't move down because the Tigers are brutal. But that's besides.
There would be a miracle required for that to change places.
Detroit Tigers, we need Riley Green to come up here and be like Mike Trout. Or Spencer Torkelson to come in here and start breaking balls out of Comerica Park.
Yeah, they need it like they need a resurrection of Babe Ruth, Mickey Mantle, and Joe DiMaggio all at once.
In reality, the Tigers need Jesus. Thank you.
They need a lot of Jesus. We need to pray.
Number 2.
Number 2, as much as I love my boys on the ice, I've got to say number 2 is going to be the Detroit Redwings. They don't have my number 1 spot because I think it's going to, again, they got some young talent. They've got now, I believe in Stevie Y and his Iser plan, but not so sure that we've got necessarily the coach that's going to get us there to move them up into number 1 in the power rankings. So development time alone, I think, is going to move him into the number 2 spot for me.
Well, my number 2 is going to be a lot different from yours.
And there's only 2 left, so...
I am going with the Detroit Lions.
All right.
You know why I'm picking the Detroit Lions at number 2? I don't really have faith in Jared Goff as a quarterback. I think he could be good, but I need to see what he is outside of LA. But the reality of the situation is you could be really, really good. The Lions could be a great team, and their quarterback play hampers them. That's why I'm kind of iffy on the Lions, but they could prove me wrong in the next season. But I like the way that they're building the team, but I do not think highly of Jared Goff. Hopefully I'm wrong. Jared Goff, it pays off because if he does, that speeds the rebuild up immensely.
Absolutely, and that of course leads us to our number 1 power rankings, and my number 1 is the Detroit Lions, and I'll tell you why, because I think they've got the right chemistry up in the executive levels, in the front office, and so I think they have that team right. I, on the other hand, really like Jared Goff. I think that he's going to be great in Detroit. I think, and I've said this in our previous shows, and I believe it, that he's just looking for an opportunity to shine. I don't think he was appreciated in LA. I don't think it was the right environment or culture for him, but I do think that it is right here, and I think he's just been waiting for an opportunity to show what he can do, and I do believe that the Lions drafted incredibly well around him, so that gave him some assistance, and I think that they really have what it takes to make it to be that number 1 power ranking team over the next 2 years. They've got all the ingredients, now they just need to execute.
I think what we talked about in the first segment rings true with Jared Goff is a wounded animal that's cornered, fights harder. I think that chip on the shoulder could really, really help, and that's why he was number 2 in my rankings. But number 1 in my rankings is the Detroit Red Wings, and now I'll tell you why. I was talking to a friend who is an NHL scout, okay? He told me that this was his honest opinion. He thinks Stevie Y is going to have a Stanley Cup contender in 2 years. And
That would be awesome.
And this is what he said. This is what he said.
That would be Ice Queen approved.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
What he said, I was like, first of all, I needed to ice myself because that was raging. It was like Viagra. I was like,
that's quite something.
I was like, oh.
Viagra on ice.
I was like, oh my god. It's like this. What he said, I couldn't fathom. He thinks that Lucas Raymond is going to be like Peter Forsberg. He said if Larkin has a guy like Peter Forsberg on his wing, that's going to be deadly. He certainly thinks that. And this guy is an NHL scout in the Central Division, that was the Central Division this year because of COVID.
Right.
And he literally told me in exact words that he thinks Moritz Seider could be a mix of Roman Josi, which Roman Josi is an elite North level defenseman, and Drew Doughty, which those are two elite conversations. He said the floor for Seider is Drew Doughty.
Wow.
I mean, the floor is Seider. I mean, the floor for Seider is Josi. And the ceiling is Doughty.
Yeah.
He goes, you couldn't get a better 2 draft picks in the next 2 years. And he goes, whoever Stevie picks this year is probably going to be great too because literally, he goes, I'm glad that we are not in your division all the time because you guys are going to be hell to pay because Stevie Y is drafting like elite level talent.
Well, here's where I can see your point and why I had him at number 2, but they're coming very close up to number 1, and that is my understanding. And as you know, we have our sources, and Joe kind of referenced one of them, but we do have our sources in and around the NHL, and I will say that word has gotten out that Steve Yzerman is making some very impressive moves in the offseason, and I think we could see some significant talent coming our way. So I can see where your point is well taken on making the Red Wings, because they could very well move up into the number 1 power rankings for me too, providing that those, what we understand, could be coming our way. If it in fact does, it is going to be literally a seismic massive earthquake here in Detroit if we get some of the folks that we've heard talk about.
But I caution, I think that the biggest thing about my number 1, and I say the same thing about your number 1, is we both believe in the culture and the general manager, and I think Jeff Blashill's a good coach. I think you think Dan Campbell's going to be a good coach.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest 2 things. You know, when we look at the Detroit Pistons and we look at the Tigers and we look at the Red Wings and we look at the Lions, there's 3 things that in our top 3 that we had in lockstep. And that was because they all had competent GMs who made shrewd moves, and they had coaching that liked to be leading guys, and they promote a hard-working culture. And that's the biggest thing, you know, when you're rebuilding, like all these teams are, what gets you to the top quicker is hard work.
Right.
Hard work. So,
which is definitely something we understand here in Detroit. That's been part of the Detroit culture since our inception. We are hard workers. Joe and I, we're your hometown team. We know that better than anything. We were born and raised here, and we live that. And these teams do. Those top 3 absolutely finally understand that.
We can appreciate the level of work ethic that these 3 teams provide. And the one thing I really want to hammer home is when you look at the Detroit Red Wings, you look at the Pistons, and you look at the Lions. There's one thing that remains the same, and it's all that they have the same identity that they want to put on the field, and that's tough, that's hardworking, and with the Tigers, you really don't see that. So that's why the Tigers were number 4 in our rankings, and we look forward to updating these throughout the summer, especially if there's some moves that come about that could be
game changers
on both sides, because there's 2 rumors that are, one is for the Lions and one is for the Red Wings that could be, well, if that happens, it could change these rankings up immensely.
Yes, sir.
We appreciate you for watching Between the Whistles. You can like our Facebook page or follow our Facebook page. You can go to our YouTube page, which we have linked in the comments, and you can subscribe. And we'll soon be on Apple and Spotify, iHeart.
We're going to be coming at you almost every way we possibly can, and that's great because if you're having a bad day like Joe and I had today, you know how to make that day better. You just got to watch an episode of the Cindy and Joe Show.
And we'll get you through it because we know.
Yes, we will.
That sometimes shit sucks.
Absolutely.
We'll see you next week, guys.